think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a harmless joke about inviting my ex as our best man. But when the courier handed me those thick legal documents and my husband's signature glared up at me, I realized he'd been planning his escape while I thought I was in control. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The bistro hummed with Friday evening energy as our group settled around the large corner table. Graham had suggested this place months ago for our regular family dinner gathering, and I'd grown fond of its warm lighting and excellent wine selection. Tonight, both sets of parents had joined us along with our 5-year-old daughter Maggie, who was coloring happily in her activity book. "Aurelia, you're glowing tonight," my mother Elsa commented, raising her glass of Chardonnay. "That new skincare routine is working wonders." I smiled, feeling particularly confident in my navy dress and freshly styled hair. "Thank you, Mum. I've been feeling really good lately." I caught Graham's eye across the table, but he was focused on cutting Maggie's chicken into smaller pieces. "Speaking of glowing," Judith, Graham's mother, interjected with her characteristic stern tone, "how are the wedding anniversary plans coming along? Your 10th is quite a milestone." Graham's father Patrick nodded silently, as he usually did, letting his wife lead the conversation while he observed. My father Simon was similarly quiet, though more out of conflict avoidance than natural reserve. "Oh, we've been discussing some fun ideas," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Actually, I had the most hilarious thought the other day." I felt the familiar rush of being the center of attention as everyone leaned in slightly. I joked with Graham about inviting Noah as our vow renewal best man. You know, since he was such an important part of my life before Graham swept me off my feet. The table fell into an uncomfortable silence. Maggie looked up from her coloring. "Who's Noah, Mummy?" "Just an old friend, sweetheart," I said quickly, then continued with a laugh. "I mean, it would be so progressive and modern, right? Show everyone how mature and secure we are in our relationship." Elsa chuckled and shook her head. "Oh, Aurelia, you're terrible. But honestly, it's good to keep men on their toes. Complacency is the death of romance." I noticed Judith's face had hardened into something resembling stone. Patrick cleared his throat uncomfortably. Graham had stopped cutting Maggie's food entirely and was staring at his plate. Graham thought it was hilarious too, I continued, emboldened by my mother's support. "Didn't you, honey?" Graham looked up, his brown eyes unreadable. "I think we should probably focus on what we actually want for our anniversary, not joke scenarios." "Oh, come on," I said, rolling my eyes playfully for the table's benefit. "Everyone knows I'm kidding. Graham just doesn't appreciate my sense of humor sometimes." "Why does Daddy look sad?" Maggie asked, her small voice cutting through the tension. Graham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Daddy's fine, sweetheart. Just tired from work." "You work too much," Judith said, her protective instincts clearly activated. "Maybe you need a vacation, away from stress." I felt a flicker of irritation at the implied criticism. Graham loves his work, and we have a wonderful life. No stress here that a little laughter can't cure. The conversation limped along for another hour, with Graham contributing less and less. When the check arrived, he stood abruptly. "I'm not feeling well," he announced. "I'm going to head home." "But we haven't ordered dessert," Elsa protested, "and Maggie wanted the chocolate cake." "You all stay," Graham said, kissing the top of Maggie's head. "I'll see you at home later, Aurelia." After he left, the table felt simultaneously lighter and more tense. Elsa immediately launched into a critique of Graham's moods, while Judith and Patrick made polite excuses and departed shortly after. Simon remained diplomatically quiet, and I found myself defending both Graham's behavior and my own joke simultaneously. When I finally arrived home 2 hours later, slightly wine-tipsy and irritated by the evening's awkward turn, I found Graham's side of the bed empty. The guest room door was closed, and I could see light underneath. As I passed by to get my pajamas from our bedroom, I heard the soft murmur of his voice and the occasional ping of text messages. The next morning, I found a crumpled receipt in the pocket of the jacket Graham had worn to dinner. Hartwell & Associates legal consultation, $200. The date was from 3 days ago. My hands trembled slightly as I stared at the paper. Legal consultation. For what? We didn't have any legal issues pending. No property disputes, no business problems. The only explanation that made sense was the one I didn't want to consider. The receipt haunted me through the weekend, but I couldn't bring myself to confront Graham directly. Instead, I found myself studying his behavior with new eyes, looking for clues I might have missed. Monday morning at the insurance office provided a welcome distraction. My cubicle was positioned perfectly to see most of the floor, and I'd always enjoyed the social dynamics of workplace gossip and relationship drama. Today, however, I was the one seeking advice. He's probably just consulting about updating your wills or something, my colleague Janet suggested during our coffee break. Men get weird about mortality when they hit their mid-30s. I wanted to believe her, but Graham's behavior at home suggested something more serious. He'd been polite but distant all weekend, focusing intensely on Maggie during her waking hours and disappearing into his home office afterward. His phone, which used to sit casually on counters and tables, now seemed permanently attached to his person. Maybe he's planning a surprise for your anniversary, offered Lisa from accounting. The legal thing could be about setting up some kind of trust or investment. That afternoon, as I processed a particularly tedious claim about water damage, my phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Thinking about you. Hope the family dinner went well Friday. I'd messaged him Saturday morning in a moment of wine hangover vulnerability, complaining about Graham's overreaction to my harmless joke. Noah had responded with exactly the validation I'd needed. He should feel lucky you chose him. Some guys don't know how to handle a confident woman. It was interesting, I typed back. Graham left early. I think he's going through some kind of midlife thing. Want to talk about it over coffee this week? I'm a good listener. The invitation sent a familiar thrill through me. Noah had always been an excellent listener, among other things. Maybe Thursday after work? Can't wait to see you. That evening, Graham was already home when I arrived, helping Maggie with a puzzle at the kitchen table. They looked up when I entered, Maggie with her usual bright smile, and Graham with polite acknowledgement. How was work? He asked, the question sounding more like social obligation than genuine interest. Fine, busy. I set down my purse and noticed his phone face down beside him. How was your day? Good. I picked Maggie up early and we went to the park. Daddy pushed me really high on the swings, Maggie announced, and we saw a dog that looked like a bear. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I ruffled her hair, then looked at Graham. Everything okay? You seem distant lately. Graham's hand moved almost protectively over his phone. Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about. Are you sure? Because if something's bothering you about Friday night, we should talk about it. Mommy, are you and Daddy mad at each other? Maggie asked, her puzzle forgotten. Of course not, baby, I said quickly. Daddy and I are fine. Sometimes grown-ups just have different ideas about things. Graham stood, scooping up his phone. I should check on some work emails. Maggie, finish your puzzle and then we'll read a story before bed. After he left the room, I sat with Maggie as she worked on the remaining pieces. Her small fingers struggled with a particularly tricky section, and I found myself thinking about the careful way Graham had avoided my eyes during our brief conversation. Maggie, I said carefully, has Daddy seemed sad to you lately? She considered this with the seriousness that 5-year-olds bring to important questions. A little bit. He talks on the phone more, and he makes different faces. Different faces, like when I break something and he's trying not to be mad. That night, after Maggie was asleep, I attempted to bridge the growing gap between Graham and me. I found him in his office, laptop open, surrounded by papers I didn't recognize. "Can we talk?" I asked from the doorway. He looked up, and for a moment I saw something raw and hurt in his expression before he composed himself. "About what?" "About us. About whatever's been bothering you since Friday." Graham closed his laptop deliberately. "What exactly do you think has been bothering me, Aurelia?" The question felt like a trap. "I don't know. That's why I'm asking." "You really don't know?" It wasn't a question, and his tone carried a weight that made my stomach clench. "Graham, if you're upset about the Noah thing, it was just a joke. Everyone knew I was kidding." "Did they?" "Of course they did. My God, you're making this into something it's not." Graham studied my face for a long moment. "When was the last time you and Noah talked?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know. Why?" "Just curious. You seem to think about him a lot lately." "That's ridiculous. I barely think about him at all." "Okay," Graham said simply, reopening his laptop. "I have some work to finish." I stood in the doorway for another minute, waiting for him to say something else, to give me an opening to fix whatever was breaking between us. When he didn't look up again, I retreated to our bedroom, where I spent an hour scrolling through old photos on my phone, looking for evidence of happier times. The next morning, I woke to find Graham already gone. A note on the kitchen counter said he'd taken Maggie to school and would be working late. When I tried to check our shared laptop for our family calendar, I discovered the password had been changed. The family BBQ at Judith and Patrick's house the following Saturday was supposed to be a casual gathering, but I could feel the undercurrents of tension from the moment we arrived. Graham had been cordially distant all week, and Maggie had started asking more frequently why Daddy seemed different. Judith's backyard was perfectly manicured, as always, with carefully tended flower beds and a pristine patio setup. She greeted us at the gate with her usual efficiency, hugging Maggie warmly and offering Graham a look that seemed to convey some kind of maternal concern. "Aurelia," she said to me, her tone notably cooler, "you look well." "Thank you, Judith. The yard looks beautiful as always." Patrick emerged from the house carrying a platter of hamburger patties, nodding his hello in his characteristically reserved way. Graham immediately went to help him with the grill, leaving me to navigate the social dynamics alone. My parents arrived 20 minutes later, Elsa immediately commandeering attention with her bright floral dress and animated storytelling. She swept Maggie into an enthusiastic hug and began regaling everyone with tales of her latest book club drama. "Where's Tessa?" I asked, noticing my sister's absence. "Running late," Simon replied, "something about a work emergency." As the afternoon progressed, I found myself working harder than usual to maintain the conversation and keep the atmosphere light. Graham remained focused on the grill and on Maggie, contributing minimally to group discussions and avoiding eye contact with me. "Graham's been so quiet lately," Elsa observed loudly during a lull in conversation. "Everything all right, dear?" Graham looked up from the hamburgers he was flipping. "Just fine, Mrs. Marwood. Thank you for asking." "He's been working too hard," I interjected, sensing an opportunity to steer the narrative. "You know how dedicated he is. Sometimes I think he forgets he has a family who wants to spend time with him too." Judith's eyebrows rose slightly. "Graham has always been excellent at balancing his priorities." "Oh, absolutely," I said quickly. "I just mean that work has been particularly demanding lately. Haven't you been staying late most nights this week, honey?" Graham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've been handling some important projects." "See?" I turned to the group with a smile. Always so responsible. Sometimes I think he needs someone to remind him how to have fun. "Aurelia certainly knows how to have fun," Elsa said with a laugh. "Remember that story she told us last week about her ex-boyfriend, the one she joked about inviting to their anniversary party?" I felt the atmosphere shift immediately. Patrick's hand paused over the hamburger buns he'd been arranging. Judith's expression grew arctic. Graham's knuckles whitened as he gripped the spatula. "Mom," I said quickly, "I don't think—" "Oh, it was hilarious," Elsa continued, oblivious to the tension. She suggested making this Noah fellow the best man for their vow renewal. Can you imagine? I told her it's good to keep men on their toes, but that might be taking it a bit far. Maggie looked up from her coloring book. Who's Noah? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Graham set down the spatula and walked over to where Maggie was sitting, kneeling beside her chair. Nobody important, sweetheart, he said softly. Just someone Mommy used to know. Like how I used to know Emma before she moved away. Something like that. Judith cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on the present rather than dwelling on the past. Exactly, I said, grateful for any opportunity to redirect. The past is the past. That's why it was funny to joke about it, because it's so obviously ridiculous. Is it? Patrick asked quietly, speaking for the first time in an hour. The question hung in the air like smoke. Graham stood slowly, his face carefully neutral. I think the burgers are ready, he announced. Maggie, would you like to help Daddy make your plate? As everyone focused on the food, I caught Judith watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. When our eyes met, she didn't look away, and I felt suddenly exposed under her scrutiny. Tessa arrived during dinner, apologizing profusely for her lateness, and bringing a bottle of wine that she immediately opened. She hugged everyone dutifully, but seemed to avoid extended conversation, particularly with me. You're being awfully quiet, I observed as she sat down with her plate. Just tired, Tessa replied. Long week. Join the club, I said. Graham's been practically mute lately. I'm starting to think all the men in our lives are having some kind of collective midlife crisis. Maybe they just have things on their minds, Tessa suggested carefully. What kinds of things? Tessa glanced at Graham, who was helping Maggie with her corn on the cob, then back at me. I don't know, Aurelia. You'd have to ask them. After dinner, as the sun began to set and Maggie played on the swing set, the adults settled around the patio table with drinks. I found myself telling stories about my insurance office colleagues, trying to recapture the easy humor that had always made me popular at gatherings like this. You should have seen this claim that came in Tuesday, I said, warming to my theme. This couple claimed their hot tub was damaged by a meteorite, but when I investigated, it turned out to be a chunk of concrete from their neighbor's renovation project. People will lie about anything, Elsa said, shaking her head. Speaking of lies, I continued, emboldened by the wine and the attention. I was telling Noah about it when we had coffee Thursday, and he reminded me of this time in college when we convinced our landlord that the hole in our apartment wall was caused by settling instead of our rather enthusiastic. Well, let's just say we were young and energetic. I laughed at the memory, expecting others to join in, but instead found myself facing a table of uncomfortable expressions. Graham had gone completely still, his beer halfway to his lips. You had coffee with Noah? Judith asked, her voice sharp. Just catching up, I said quickly. Old friends, you know. I thought he was just someone you used to know, Maggie called from the swing set, her young voice carrying clearly across the yard. Graham set down his beer and stood up. Maggie, it's time to go. But I'm not done swinging. Now, sweetheart. There was something in his tone that made everyone look up. Maggie, sensitive to adult moods in the way children often are, immediately stopped swinging and ran over to him. Graham, I started, but he was already gathering Maggie's things. Thank you for dinner, he said to his parents. We'll talk soon. He loaded Maggie into the car without another word to me. I found myself standing in the driveway, keys in hand, watching his taillights disappear down the street. Well, Elsa said from behind me, that was dramatic. When I turned around, I saw Judith and Patrick standing in their doorway, their faces grave. Tessa was already walking to her car, her goodbye wave half-hearted and distant. I should go, I said to no one in particular. That night I came home to an empty house. Graham's car wasn't in the driveway, and when I called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. I tried Judith's house, but no one answered. At midnight, I finally received a text. Staying at my parents' tonight. Maggie is fine. The next morning, I found an email in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. Notice of separation and custody considerations, Hartwell and Associates. The subject line of the email hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my laptop screen in the kitchen, still in my pajamas, coffee growing cold in my hands. This couldn't be real. Graham was upset, yes, but filing for separation. Over a harmless joke and coffee with an old friend. I clicked the email with trembling fingers. The language was formal, legal, and devastating in its clinical precision. Notice of intent to pursue legal separation, temporary custody arrangements, division of assets. The words blurred together as panic rose in my chest. My first instinct was to call Graham, but his phone continued going straight to voicemail. I tried Judith's house again. No answer. It was as if they'd all conspired to cut me off completely. By noon, I was dressed and driving to Judith's house. Graham's car was in the driveway, and I could see Maggie's bike on the front porch. I rang the doorbell repeatedly until Patrick finally answered. "Aurelia," he said, his usual quiet demeanor now seeming almost hostile. "Graham doesn't want to see you right now." "This is ridiculous, Patrick. We need to talk about this like adults. I'm his wife." "Are you?" The question stopped me cold. "What is that supposed to mean?" "I think you know." Behind him, I could hear Maggie's laughter and the sound of cartoons playing on the television. My daughter was in there, probably confused about why Daddy had brought her to Grandma and Grandpa's house for a sleepover on a random Sunday. "I want to see my daughter." Patrick's expression softened slightly. "She's fine, Aurelia. She's happy. Maybe you should think about what's best for her right now." The door closed with a soft but final click. I spent the rest of Sunday calling everyone I could think of who might provide support or advice. Elsa was immediately outraged on my behalf, declaring Graham's behavior absolutely unacceptable and suggesting I hire the most aggressive lawyer in town. "He's trying to punish you for having a sense of humor," she fumed over the phone. "This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior I was worried about when you married him." Simon was more measured but equally supportive. "These things usually blow over," he said in his diplomatic way. "Graham's probably just feeling unsettled and needs some time to cool down." Tessa, however, was notably less sympathetic when I finally reached her. "Aurelia," she said after I'd explained the situation, "can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course." "Are you having an affair with Noah?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "What? No. God, Tessa, how can you even ask that?" "Because you talk about him constantly. Because you had coffee with him and didn't mention it to your husband. Because you made a joke about inviting him to your anniversary celebration in front of both sets of parents." "Those are completely innocent." "Are they?" I found myself unable to answer immediately, and in that pause, I heard Tessa sigh. "I have to go," she said. "But Aurelia, maybe think about how your behavior looks from the outside." Monday morning brought no relief. Graham still wasn't answering his phone, and when I drove by his office building, I didn't see his car in the parking lot. I considered going up to his floor, but realized I had no idea what I would say. At work, I found myself unable to concentrate on claims processing. Instead, I spent most of the day crafting text messages to Graham that I deleted without sending, and updating my social media with carefully curated posts designed to project normalcy and happiness. Family BBQ yesterday. I posted alongside a photo from before the evening went sideways. So grateful for all the love and laughter in our lives. Awanas blessed for Char's family Texar's Sunday fun. The responses were immediate and supportive. Friends and acquaintances liked and commented with heart emojis and messages about how perfect our family looked. The validation felt good, but it also felt hollow. Tuesday brought another email from Hartwell and Associates, this one requesting my contact information for service of official documents. I called the number listed, reaching a receptionist who was polite but unhelpful. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Fenwick. but I can't discuss the details of your case without proper authorization. You'll need to speak with your own attorney." "My own attorney? This is all a misunderstanding. My husband is just upset about something trivial. We don't need attorneys." "Ma'am, your husband has retained our services for a legal separation. I strongly recommend you seek independent legal counsel." That afternoon, I broke down and sent a long text to Noah. "Graham has completely lost his mind. He's filed for separation because I mentioned having coffee with you. Can you believe this? I feel like I'm living in some kind of nightmare where having a friend is grounds for divorce." Noah's response was immediate and exactly what I needed to hear. He's obviously threatened by our connection. Some men can't handle when their wives have a past or maintain friendships with people who actually understand them. You deserve better than this kind of jealous, controlling behavior. "Thank you for saying that. I feel like I'm going crazy." "Want to meet for a drink tonight? Sounds like you could use someone to talk to who actually gets it." I hesitated for only a moment before responding. "Yes, I really need a friend right now." Wednesday evening, I sat across from Noah in a dimly lit wine bar downtown, feeling simultaneously guilty and vindicated. He looked exactly as I remembered. Dark hair slightly tousled, green eyes that seemed to see right through me, that easy smile that had first attracted me 15 years ago. "You look stressed," he observed, reaching across the table to touch my hand briefly. "I am stressed. My entire life is falling apart because my husband can't handle the fact that I have a past." "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the joke at the restaurant, about Graham's increasing coldness, about the legal papers, and the way his family had closed ranks against me. Noah listened with the kind of focused attention that Graham hadn't given me in months, nodding sympathetically and asking all the right questions. "He's trying to isolate you," Noah said when I finished. "Make you doubt yourself, make you think you're the problem. It's classic manipulation." "That's exactly what it feels like. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I looked into his familiar green eyes and felt something shift inside me. "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to let him destroy our family over his own insecurities." When I got home that night, I found that Graham had been to the house. Half of his clothes were gone from our closet, along with several boxes of his personal items. On the kitchen counter was a note. "Picked up some things. Maggie is fine and asks about you. We'll call tomorrow to discuss logistics." I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then immediately retrieved it and smoothed it out again. Despite everything, seeing his handwriting made my chest ache with a loneliness I wasn't prepared to acknowledge. Thursday morning brought the registered letter I'd been dreading. Petition for legal separation and temporary custody order, official, legal, and terrifyingly real. As I read through the formal language, I realized Graham had been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. The detail and preparation involved weren't the work of someone acting impulsively out of hurt feelings. This was methodical. This was final. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I started to wonder if I had underestimated my quiet, loyal husband entirely. The law offices of Morrison, Klein and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming downtown building, all glass and steel and intimidation. I'd chosen them based on their website's promise of aggressive advocacy for women in family law disputes, and their consultation fee had made me wince even as I wrote the check. Sarah Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and an even sharper suit. She listened to my story with professional sympathy, taking notes on a yellow legal pad and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "So your husband filed for separation because you joked about inviting an ex-boyfriend to your anniversary party," she summarized when I finished. "Essentially, yes. I mean, there were some other minor things. We had coffee once, and I might have mentioned Noah in conversation more than Graham was comfortable with, but nothing that justifies this nuclear option." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "And you say Mr. Fenwick has temporary custody of your daughter?" "Yes, but only because he took her to his parents' house and won't bring her home. It's essentially kidnapping. Has he prevented you from seeing or speaking with your daughter? I hesitated. Well, no. He's responded when I've texted asking about her, and he said she asks about me, but he won't let me come get her. I see. Sarah made another note. Mrs. Fenwick, I need to ask you directly. Are you having a sexual or romantic relationship with this Noah person? Absolutely not. We're just friends. Old friends catching up. Any physical contact? Kissing, touching, anything that could be construed as intimate? No, nothing like that. What about emotional intimacy? Long conversations about your marriage, sharing feelings you don't share with your husband, seeking comfort or validation from him about your relationship? The questions were making me uncomfortable. I don't think talking to a friend about problems in your marriage constitutes an affair, if that's what you're getting at. It might, depending on the extent and nature of those conversations. Courts take emotional affairs very seriously in custody determinations. Before I could respond, Sarah's assistant knocked and entered with a thick manila envelope. This just arrived by messenger for Mrs. Fenwick. My stomach dropped as I recognized the return address. Hartwell and Associates. Sarah opened it efficiently, her expression growing more serious as she flipped through the contents. Mrs. Fenwick, she said finally, we need to discuss some things. She turned the folder around so I could see the contents. The first page was a timeline, meticulously documented, starting 3 months ago. Below that were printed screenshots of text messages, call logs, and what appeared to be bank statements. These are your text messages with Noah Larkin, Sarah said, pointing to the first set of screenshots. Dating back 12 weeks, the frequency and content suggest a relationship that goes well beyond casual friendship. I stared at the messages, seeing them compiled together for the first time. Taken individually, each seemed innocent enough. Together, they painted a picture I didn't want to acknowledge. March 15th. Graham doesn't understand me the way you do, Sarah read aloud. March 22nd. I keep thinking about what you said about settling for security over passion. April 3rd. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd tried harder to make it work. Those were taken out of context, I said weakly. April 18th. You always know exactly what to say to make me feel better about myself. May the 2nd. Graham went to bed early again. I feel so lonely in my own house. Sarah continued through several more pages of messages, each one seeming more damning than the last, when stripped of the emotional context in which I'd sent them. The timeline showed the frequency increasing dramatically over the past month, with messages sent during work hours, late at night, and early in the morning. Mrs. Fenwick, these messages span a period of 3 months and show increasing emotional intimacy and marital dissatisfaction. A judge will likely consider this evidence of an emotional affair. But we never did anything physical. That may not matter. Look at this. She flipped to another section of the folder. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants and bars where you met Mr. Larkin. Your husband's attorney has done their homework. The evidence was overwhelming and damning in ways I hadn't anticipated. There were witness statements from the family dinner where I'd made the best man joke, including a detailed account from Judith about my behavior and comments. There were social media screenshots showing posts I'd made that contradicted things I'd told Graham, and bank records showing cash withdrawals that coincided with my meetings with Noah. How did they get all of this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Most of it is legally obtainable. Text message records from phone companies, credit card statements, social media posts. The witness statements are voluntary. His family is lying about me. Mrs. Fenwick, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about a joke or a friendship. Your husband's attorney has built a case that you've been conducting an emotional affair while publicly humiliating your husband and potentially exposing your daughter to inappropriate behavior. That's not what happened. Sarah closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. What happened is that you developed an intimate emotional relationship with another man, shared details of your marriage with him, met with him secretly, and made public comments that suggested you were considering him as more than just a friend. Whether you intended it or not, that constitutes an affair in the eyes of the law. The room felt like it was spinning. So, what does this mean for custody of Maggie? It means your husband has a strong case for primary custody. Courts prioritize stability and moral fitness when determining what's in the best interest of the child. An affair, even an emotional one, raises questions about both. I left the law office 2 hours later with a retainer agreement I could barely afford and a sick understanding of how thoroughly I'd underestimated Graham's resolve. The quiet, loyal man I'd married had methodically documented every conversation, every meeting, every careless word I'd shared with Noah or spoken in public. That evening, I called my parents from my empty house, needing support and validation more than I ever had in my adult life. "This is absolutely outrageous," Elsa declared when I explained the situation. "He's been spying on you, gathering evidence like some kind of private investigator. That's not normal behavior, Aurelia." "Your mother's right," Simon added, though he sounded less certain. "Marriage is supposed to be about trust, not surveillance." But even as they offered support, I could hear something different in their voices, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. "Mum," I said carefully, "you believe me that I didn't do anything wrong, right?" The pause before she answered lasted just a beat too long. "Of course, sweetheart. You're just a friendly person. Graham should have been secure enough in your marriage to handle that." That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, scrolling through months of messages with Noah. Reading them all together, compiled like evidence in a criminal case, I began to see what Graham had seen, what a judge would see. The woman in these messages was unhappy, seeking validation, sharing intimate details of her marriage with another man. She was emotionally invested in someone outside her marriage in ways that went far beyond friendship. But that woman wasn't me. That was just a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of innocent conversations between old friends. Wasn't it? For the first time since this nightmare began, I found myself wondering if I was the one who had been misunderstanding everything. The family courthouse wasn't dramatic, just small, grey, and unforgiving. Graham sat across the room, calm and composed, wearing the navy suit I'd once picked out for him. I barely recognized him. His lawyer spoke first, laying out a tidy narrative of my betrayal. Texts, late nights, messages to Noah that sounded far worse when read aloud. Each word chipped away at the version of myself I'd clung to. When it was my turn, my explanations fell apart under questioning. "Were your communications appropriate for a married woman?" the judge asked. I hesitated too long before whispering, "No, Your Honor." The ruling came swiftly. Temporary sole custody to Graham, supervised visits for me, control of the house and finances to him. My punishment wasn't anger or shouting, it was precision. Afterward, Graham approached quietly. "This doesn't have to be permanent," he said. "If you do the work, we can figure out what's best for Maggie." Through the window, I saw him buckle our daughter into his car. She waved, smiling, trusting. I couldn't wave back. For months, I'd believed I was in control. But Graham hadn't been planning his escape. He'd been planning our daughter's rescue. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.